Hi everyone, welcome back to another For Those Who Go video. This channel is where we learn and share skills about design and development. If you want to grow your skills and learn new things that's coming up, please like, share and subscribe for more. In this video, we'll be continuing with the part 2 series on building a simple CRUD application with Fastify and React. Where in the part 1 we created our backend APIs with Fastify, and if you have not watched part 1 yet, the link is here down below and here it comes to your right. In this part 2 of the series, we'll be consuming APIs inside of our React project. And to build this simple note-taking application, we'll be using React Context API to deal with the state inside of our project without having to drill down props manually. We'll obviously be using React functional components along with React hooks and React router to navigate between our pages. Moreover, we'll be using Tailwind JIT compiler, which is Tailwind just-in-time compiler, to generate our styles on demand as we write CSS instead of generating everything in advance at initial build time. Let's take a quick look at what we'll be building. It's a note-taking app, so I've just called it Noti, which sounds pretty much funny, but we'll stick with it. So I've also created a dummy logo for it, and currently, as you can see here, we don't have a note yet. So let's go ahead and create a note. So to create a note, we can just give a random title for now. I'll just call it Context API with hooks in React. And for the description, I can just grab a random text string for now and paste it right here. And also same goes to the date here. So let's go ahead and add a note. And as you can see here, our note has been added to our database, and we are fetching that particular note inside of our React project right here. So we can also visit the detail and see a single note. And if you go back, and also we can visit and just edit this particular note, and we can just write revise here and add a note, and if we go back, our revise has been added here. So furthermore, we can just go ahead and delete this one, and we are back to the same where we don't have any notes yet. So this is pretty much what we'll be trying to build, and to achieve this we'll be using pretty much good stuffs like Context API, hooks, and Tailwind JIT compiler. So it will be pretty much interesting. So without any delay, let's get it started. Currently, I'm in same files and folders where we left off last time in part 1. And you may have noticed that we have left the client folder where our React code lives is pretty much empty inside. So let's fill it in. So in our client folder, we just have package.json file, but without let's first not dive inside of client, but inside of our server, I want to add a package inside of the server code. And while we visit the package.json file, we don't see that particular package here. So I'll just grab the package and bring it over here. And the package is Fastify course. And let's copy this one and let's bring it in. So right here, as you can see here, I have two terminals running. And in the right, we have the client side, and in the left, we have the server. And you can also see the thing right here, which is the server and the client. And obviously, we'll be adding three terminals. So it would be really interesting to work on because we'll be running three terminals inside of our development process. So the third terminal that we'll be adding is the Tailwind JIT just-in-time compiler. So anyway, for now, let's go ahead and paste this package that we are trying to install, which is Fastify course. After the installation, let's go ahead and go to our app.js file, and inside here we want to grab this particular line here, which is Fastify that's register require Fastify course, where we can add that particular line right here as well. So let's save this one, and let's go ahead and spin up our backend server. So npm run npm start. Okay, so it looks like our backend server is successfully running. So in our client side here, I will just go ahead and create a blank slate a React project from npx create React app. But if you wish to, you can also use the good tools like white or any other stuffs available out there. So I'll just add a blank project from npx CRUD React app. After pretty much our project has been created, inside of our client folder right here, we just want to kill our server right here because we won't be using our server right now. So inside of our client here, I just want to remove all the unnecessary files that we have here, which is app.css. I just want to remove it and just move it to trash. And then also index.css, I don't want it, and then move it to trash. And I also don't want to have our tests running, so let's move this one also into trash. And obviously the logo.svg, which is the React logo, we just don't want to touch it. Okay, moving on to the other files. Setup, I think let's take a look at the report web vitals. So we don't want report web vitals either. And setup tests, I think let's leave it for now. And it looks like everything is fine. So let's build some folders right here. So the folders that we are trying to build is, let's make components folder right here. And furthermore, we should need some styles folder because we are gonna import some styles from Tailwind. So we are just adding styles right here. And let's also delete this setup.test, and let's remove the web titles and also the CSS. We can add, just have React here, and just add a paragraph. This is a main page. Let's save this, and this pretty much looks fine to me. Inside of our index, we are just importing the app, and let's also make another folder in advance, which is the context. This is where our global state lives, which we'll be making through our context API. And furthermore, we need another one last folder, which is assets. This is where we have one S. So this is where our assets live. So assets, component, context, and styles. This is pretty much the folder structure that we'll be going for. So first of all, I want to do two things. The first thing, I want to load in environment variables inside of our React project. For that one, I want to create a file right inside of our src. I think that should be outside. So it's inside here. It's not a folder, it's a file. So I'll call it .env. This basically loads in the environment variables from our backend. This is pretty much the current environment variable that we'll be needing, which is the port that our backend is running, which will be this particular 5000, because we have defined the port inside of our backend server inside of our env, which is 5000. Oops, this is a secret. After the environment variables has been loaded inside of our client folder right here, the next step that we want to take is just bring in the Tailwind JIT compiler. So first of all, let's take a look at whether we are all running well. So npm start. So this should spin up a server for us, and it basically does spin up the server, which is right here. And this this is the main page, and it looks like everything is working fine. So let's load in our Tailwind JIT. So to load in our Tailwind JIT, I want to kill the server running for the front end, and I want to load in few packages that we need. And the packages that we need are pretty much the necessary packages, which are Tailwind CSS, which is obviously the Tailwind utility first CSS framework that we'll be using, and Post CSS tool for transforming CSS with JavaScript, and auto prefixer to add vendor prefixes to our CSS rules, and obviously the Post CSS CLI is also needed, and that's D flag for adding it as a div dependency. After this has been pretty much installed, we will be going to our src, and inside of our styles, let's go ahead and bring in the new files here. So the first file that we'll be making is tailwind.css, and another file is output.css. So tailwind.css will import all the Tailwind classes inside here, and the output hood spits out the output of our overall JIT compiler running behind the scene. So inside of our Tailwind CSS right here, I want to bring in the three things, which is base components and utilities, and hit on save and close this one. And inside of our output, it will be taken care by Tailwind CSS itself. So I should not take much care of that one. So the next step would be creating the config files for our Tailwind. So the config files for our Tailwind can be generated with npx tailwind css init -- full. So I'll just paste in the command right here and enter. And with this command, we should be creating the Tailwind configuration, which is tailwind config.js file right here. And it looks like a lot of stuffs have been loaded here. I guess we don't need this much stuffs here. So let's see. So another commands that we'd be using to configure Tailwind is this particular command, which is npx tailwind css init, which creates Tailwind css config file, and Tailwind css config.js would be also be making a post css.config.js file. After hitting this one, it would definitely create two files, which has been created to us. So inside of our post css config file, everything looks fine. So I'll just check the stuff that I have. So I will just replace it with this, which is we'll be using the plugin for Tailwind CSS JIT. That's why we replaced our post.css config file. And also we don't want to make the use of the default Tailwind config.js, which is right here. So we want to remove that one. So Tailwind CSS config file, and we want to keep it pretty much lean. And this is what we pretty much need for this project right now. And right here we want to enable the mode, which is the Tailwind JIT mode, and everything looks pretty much fine. We are pretty much making the use of purge, and this is pretty much fine for now. Let's hit on save, and let's go ahead and spin up our server and to see that our Tailwind is running pretty much well or not. But before moving there, I just want to make a few tweaks inside of our scripts right here, and we want to make the use of another command right here, which is watch CSS. So this basically watches CSS. So as we discussed before, we will be making the use of three terminals that's running behind the scene. So this is just npm watch CSS. So the command would be npm run watch CSS. We'll be making the use of this pretty much sooner. So after this has been done, let's go ahead and import the Tailwind CSS output.css file inside of our app.js file. So inside of src, inside of app.js, we want to import that particular stuff right here. So which basically is inside of our styles and output.css. It's empty right now, but will be the Tailwind will be generating the output right there. So we are importing that output.css right here. And after the importing our output.css, let's go ahead and test this one out. So first of all, I want to bring on another terminal. So this would be, let's rename this one to Tailwind. So this would be another terminal that's running in the client. So I want to navigate to client, and I want to hit npm run watch CSS. It looks like something is not configured well. Let me see it. So I have pretty much figured out the problem. The problem is we forgot to add another dependency, which is Tailwind CSS slash JIT dash D for our installing it as a dev dependency. And we have all pretty much installed this one, which is Tailwind JIT. And if we take a look at the package.json file, inside here we have the Tailwind JIT added inside of dev dependencies as well. So after this one, we can pretty much run npm run watch css right now, and it looks like we have successfully listening to our css changes. So after everything is done, let's go ahead and create some basic styles. So I have also created a bit of Figma file for take a reference for our some of the design that we have. So let's take a look at that. These are pretty much the designs that I created before, a quick design. So that's a pretty much empty state for now in the first, so we don't have any notes. And to create a note, we have this kind of form. And after creating note, we have the list populated like this. And obviously the detail of note is pretty much simpler, which is just heading, description, and a date. So this is pretty much what we'll be achieving. So behind the scene, I'll go ahead and export each asset that we need. So meanwhile, let's move back to our project, and we want to make sure that Tailwind is running pretty much fine. So to check that one, we have the watch CSS command running, as well as our client command running. So I want to add a class name to this one. So I will add a class name, and that would be text green 500 and font extra bold. So the text is green, so let's check. The text is green, so that's awesome. And if we inspect this one, and we have the text green 500 and font extra bold. Okay, let's go ahead and change this particular green to red, so that we are sure that everything is working fine as we just save everything. And if you take a look, yellow, and we have the red text right there, and it's listening to our changes, and our npm run watch as command is working fine. So everything looks pretty much fine for now. Let's go ahead and create some components for now. Inside of our components folder, let's first create a new component. Let's start with header.js. So we will create header.js, and let's copy this right here, and let's rename this to header, and we want to rename, change all occurrence, and call it header, and class name can just be empty for now. And then inside of our paragraph right here, this is a header. All right, so it looks fine, and let's remove this class name for now as well. So this looks pretty much fine. So let's create other components inside here. The other components would be node detail. So let's copy this one, and I want to create another component or a file here, and call it node detail. And inside here, we want to call this as node detail, and here we will just call it, this is a node detail. So everything looks fine. Let's go ahead and create other components, which is a node edit. Inside here, we will just copy everything that we have here and paste it here, and we will call this node edit. And this is a node edit. And other components that we'll be needing is node list and node new. So I'll be adding that too as well. We have already created components that we need: header, node detail for looking at a particular component, node edit to edit a particular node, node list to list all the components of node inside this node list, and node new to add a new node. So everything looks fine. So let's go ahead to header, and inside the header we want to replicate pretty much what we have inside of our design that we created here. It would be a logo and then a bar here with a subtle shadow. So let's go ahead and create it. So first of all, let's import the logo that we created. It's already inside of our assets right here. So I will just import that particular logo right here. And after that logo has been imported, we want to um, remove this div and call it header, because header is a semantic HTML tag, so we want to make the use of header right here. And let's also change this to React, because we want to make the use of emmet inside here. And inside of header, we want to make the use of another semantic HTML, which is nav. And the nav can have a class name. So a class name of padding of y of 7 and shadow of MD, and this will, and then we have pretty much a margin bottom of 80 pixels. So this particular thing right here, if you aren't aware of this particular thing, this is pretty much introduced in Tailwind JIT. So pretty much what we have, we will take a look at that particular stuff. So let's hit a save. And if we take a look at the Tailwind JIT, so inside here, if you take a look at enabling Tailwind JIT is here, watch all modes. And inside new features, we have pretty much a new feature, which is this particular stuff that is arbitrary value support. So you can see here we can add in custom values right here, which is width 762 pixel, height 918, or in a case of margin, we could also use the same, which is margin top of the pixels that we need. That's the same thing that we did. So it's just margin bottom of 80 pixels, which is passing the arbitrary values to this particular stuff, which is MB dash, which is margin bottom. All right, so for the image right here, we can add a class name of MX Auto, because we want to add this to center. And the source looks fine, and let's also add an alt text right here, app logo. So everything looks fine, and we'll be using this particular header inside of our application overall. So that's why this would come into play inside of our app.js. So everything inside of app. So this particular header would go outside of this particular app. So let's import React Router DOM so that we can make the use of routes as well. So I've opened up app.js and index.js, which is pretty much files that we created before, which is these two main files. So we'll be pretty much editing these two files to make our router pretty much working fine. So inside of our app.js here, we want to grab all the components that we made. So let's grab in all the components, including the React router and switch from React Router DOM. So I want to just paste in all the imports that we created right here. So it's node list, node detail, node new, and node edit. So I want to wrap everything inside here with switch block and add the routes to each of these components that we made. So that would be pretty much this one right here. So I have already added the components that we need, which we already created before, and for edit we are passing here ID, and for detail we are passing ID as our query parameter, so to say. So this is pretty much fine for now. So we have our app.js pretty much working fine. So now let's move on to index.js file. So we pretty much don't need app.js now. So inside of our index.js file, we need to import browser router, and obviously later on we will also import global provider inside here for managing our global state. So inside of our index.js file here, we want to make the use of browser router from React Router DOM so that we can seamlessly change our routes inside of our project right here. So inside of here, we want to wrap this particular app inside of our browser router. So I will just import browser router and add everything right here. So let's grab browser router and wrap our app inside of our browser router, and we want the header bar, which is the component that we created before, to be available in all the pages. That's why the header bar is out there and the app is inside here, so that we can just change the routes inside of our app. So inside of our app, we just added switches that we need, and it's pretty much basically that's it. Let's take a look at the browser. What do we have here? Let's hit refresh, and you can see here this is a node listing component, because this particular component has been defined as a path of hash. So if we go to the add, so if we just add, and we should see this is a node new component, and as you can see here, we don't have any issues as well. And if we go to edit, then let's change this to edit, and this takes in some ID, so we can just pass in anything we want right now. So this is node edit. Okay, so let's go to node detail and ID. So this is detail and ID can be anything. So this is a node detail, and looks like the router is pretty much working fine. And let's go to our main screen, which is the node listing component, and inside here we will populate the list of all the nodes that's inside of our database. So for that one, we will be obviously making the use of React Context API, and we will go inside of our context folder right here and also import our React context. So first of all, let's define two files inside here. The first thing is app reducer, and the second is global state. Let's call it app reducer.js, and another thing that we need is global state.js. Inside of our app reducer, first of all, we want to export a default function and call it app reducer, and which takes in state and action as its parameters. And we'll make some switch statements inside here. If the action type is a certain action type that matches this particular case, for example, we just added add all nodes, which fetches all the nodes from the database inside of our React project, and it returns the old state, spreading the old state, and it returns the new nodes with the action.payload, which is the spread operator that's used. And this is pretty much it for getting all the nodes that we have from our database. So I guess inside of our database we don't have any nodes yet, but we will make the use of Insomnia to add nodes and fetch all the nodes here for the time being. So this is pretty much it for the app reducer. Let's move on to the global state. Inside of our global state, we will import create context and use reducer from React first. After these two has been imported, we also need to import app reducer that we created right now. So we will just import app reducer as well. After importing the app reducer, we want to initialize an empty state, which is the empty state for our nodes. And later on, when we fetch some data, that particular state will be updated. So the first of all, the state of nodes that we'll be tracking is empty. So we'll create a constant and call it initial state. And the initial state is an object, and inside here we want to add our nodes, and it's an empty node first of all. So after this has been done, we want to export our global context with the initial state. So this is pretty much the line that we need right now. And then after this has been done, we want to export global provider along with the children that's available to us. So so inside of our global state, we added another function which is called add all node, which takes in nodes as a parameter, and it dispatches an action which is add all nodes. So this particular thing should match with this particular thing right here, which is add all nodes, and the payload that it takes is nodes, and we are accepting the state and action inside here, and we are making the use of action.payload right here, which will update our nodes obviously. So this particular add a node will be passing as a global context provider inside here, and we also have the nodes which is stated nodes that has been passed inside of our global context provider. And after everything is done, we gonna wrap our document or wrap our application with the provider. So to wrap our application with a provider so that we can make the use of everything um, that's needed for our application, we need to head towards index.js file right here. So inside of our index.js file, let's import our global provider. So after the global provider has been imported, we want to wrap our application with this global provider so that all the state is available to our application overall. So global provider, and we need to close that particular global provider right here. And after this has been done, let's go ahead and format it, and let's hit save, and let's also hit save. And if we take a look at our browser right here, everything looks fine, so we are pretty much fine until now. So let's go to our listing page, which is the page that we want to populate the data with. So inside of our component, we have the node list. So inside of our node list, we will make the use of our use effect hook inside here so that we can fetch all the data that we need and update our state that we are trying to maintain. All right. So first thing inside of our node list, where we want to populate all the list of nodes, we want to first import use context and use effect, and obviously the global context as well. So we want to hit enter, and right on the top we want to import three things, which is also the link as well. So we are importing use context. Obviously we are making the use of use context, and obviously use effect. So we want to run and grab all the data using use effect hook, and link, which helps us to navigate to a different page, and obviously global context to grab all the context that has been stored inside of our global context that we created. So inside of our node list, we want to create a constant which basically holds in two things, which is we are taking the nodes, which is the nodes from our global context, and we are obviously adding the add all nodes, which is taken from the global context. If you can see here, we have add all nodes here, and which is add all nodes, and which is add all nodes, and obviously the nodes here. So these two are the things that we gonna need inside here. That's why we are importing there and destructuring that two stuffs inside. So inside of our return function right here, we want to map it out. So we want to map the data that we are receiving. So to map the data, we need to first of all create use effect hook, so that we want to create external HTTP requests to our backend server. So for that one, we will just create get nodes, and pretty much we have added a line of comment here because ESLint will be yelling out why this is so. For temporary reasons, we are just adding it. So another thing that we need is to make the use of get nodes function that we added inside of use effect. So inside of our get nodes function right here, we are making the use of async await, where we wait for the fetch request to be successful, and it's a promise. So we use the callback dot then, and after all, we added add all nodes and updated it with data. So we haven't made the use of nodes yet, so we'll definitely make the use of nodes, obviously. So the nodes that has been inside here will be mapped out inside of our template right here, which is inside of our return inside of JSX. So inside of our return right here, we will just map the all nodes that we have inside of here. So I'll just grab in and paste this snippet which I have written. So this will just map out all the nodes that we have, and let's format this one, and this is basically what do we have here in the node list. So we have the nodes, and we are mapping each node with the key ID that has been taken, and obviously we are adding some Tailwind JIT classes, or in a sense it's just Tailwind classes, which is it should be rounded medium, and border of width of 1 pixels, and then padding, and then border gray of 100, and shadow of SM, and then margin bottom of 1 rem equivalent to 16 pixels, and all the Tailwind classes. Let's hit a save, and if you take a look at the browser here, we should see course has been blocked. So and if we take a look at the request, or there has been a fetch request that has been going on. So it's not successful because we haven't started our backend server yet. So let's go ahead and add or spin up our backend server as well. So inside of here, let's go to our command, which is npm start, and after the server is pretty much running fine, then we should see some data right here. So let's see, we have a successful code of 200, which says that our API request is pretty much successful in fetching the data. And in the response, we don't see any response yet, but it says it's successful. Let's take a look at what we have done mistake right here. I figured out the problem. The problem was, it's funny that we didn't have any notes inside of our database. So I posted the note through Insomnia, and if I get all notes, we should see a note. And if we hit on refresh, then we can see this particular node inside of our React app right here. So which says that everything is working pretty much fine, and we don't have any errors till now. So going back to what do we have here, we can post a further note, but what we want to do is go ahead and add some icons over here and do some routings. After we added some icons right there inside of our card here, we have pretty much a decent thing going on. So let's go to our delete first, so that we will make the use of the delete card or delete a note. So this is particular the button to delete. So let's add a on-click handler to this one, so which is called delete notes, which takes in notes ID. So we haven't made the use of this particular delete note inside of our context, but we will be surely making that one. So for delete note, we want to create another asynchronous function. So for delete, we want to make the request to the delete API that we create. So that would be pretty much this one, which takes in ID as a parameter, and it just sends down this particular as a base URL and concatenates ID, and the method is delete, and we want to after the method is we want to add a callback to this one, which is after this has been resolved, then we take in ID and remove the particular note. So this remove note hasn't been imported from the use context. So the next step would be importing remove note or adding remove note inside of our context. So let's go ahead and first of all import this from our context right here. And we haven't really made the use of remove node inside of our context. So let's go ahead and add that inside of our context right here. So inside of our app producer, we want to make a new case of deleting the node. So inside of our app producer, we want to add another one, which is remove a node. There would be another case of removing a node. So I'll just add the case for deleting a node. So this is a case for deleting a node where we spread the old state that we have currently, and the node should be the state.nodes.filter of the nodes, and we filter down the node.id, which is not equal to the action.payload, which in a sense we are searching or filtering down the node.id, and the node is all the nodes that we have inside of our state, and we are filtering down all the nodes, and if it matches to action.payload, um, or then we filter it down and then delete that particular stuff. So this is pretty much it for app reducer right here. Let's hit save and let's move back to our global state. So inside of our global state, we want to add another dispatch of our event. So inside of our global state, we want to add a delete, remove one node. So we will add remove one node right here, and we want to also add remove one node inside of our global context provider value right here. So let's format this and let's hit save, and let's also hit save to our app reducer. So after these two cases and dispatch has been added here, we should be pretty much fine to delete our nodes from here. So let's test it out inside of our browser. Let's hit a refresh and let's close everything here, and let's go to our network and let's hit a delete. And as you can see here, we have successfully deleted, and we are getting delete request and a 200 in response, which says that we have successfully made API request. So by this approach, we gonna add another few more things right here. So which would be like going to a different route. So if we see here, as you can see here, we don't have any nodes. Let's send a node, and I hope we have one node in the database. So if we hit a refresh, then we should see one node, and let's work on like editing, and let's first work on the detail. So if we rather move on to node detail, then we should add some snippets right here to add node detail. So inside of our node detail, we need to add some scripts so that it would fetch the ID that has been passed in to this particular route params.id, which is extracted from route params.id. And for the node detail, then for the node detail, I don't want to personally type everything out, but I will try to explain my best to you. So everything has been added here. So I have written this one down. Generally, it takes a route. You shouldn't miss this one, which is the route. And from the route, match.params.id, we are getting the current node ID, which is the current ID that we are looking or we have clicked. And after taking that one, we are concatenating it to our base URL and getting the data. If the response is not okay, which is exclamation sign at the front, which is not okay, then we are throwing out error. If it's okay, then it's this get one node to our data that has been passed in, and the get one node is brought in from the global context. So we haven't made the use of or written get one node yet, but we will definitely. And ultimately, we are like finding the node, which is current node is equal to node ID. So the current node ID which the users are visiting equals to the node ID inside of our database. Then we find that particular node and like set selected node, which is a local state, and we will set this particular state to that particular data. So we are printing that particular data right here, which is select nodes.date and select nodes.title, which is pretty much a local state we are updating after we fetch all the data that we want, or in a sense filtering the data that we want. So this is basically it, but we haven't made the use of get one node inside of our global context. So let's go ahead and add get one node. So inside of our app reducer file here, we will add another case of getting one node. So I'll just add this particular thing that I've created, which takes the action.payload and it filters down the note with the note ID and get note.id, which is the action.payload.id, or in a sense is just payload ID that has been passed in, and we return the get note. So with this, pretty much we are okay for our app reducer part here. So let's go ahead and see our global state. So inside of our global state, we need to add another dispatch event for our getting one note. So to get one particular note, we have this particular function that we have created, which is this thing, which generally dispatch an action, which is get one note, and we the payload is just an ID, and get one note is not available here, so we will pass in so that it will be accessed as a global context provider over all the application. And if we take a look at the browser here and go to the ID, then we successfully see that particular ID because it's the ID that has been passed in as um, payload. So that's particular it. So let's go ahead and hit go back. Then we go to back to this route, and if we delete, this has been deleted as well. So I will just add another one, so we don't have a blank array there. So let's go ahead and make the use of edit one. We obviously have this particular ID here. So that's where that edit comes into play. So inside of our note edit, we want to add two things here. The first thing is we want to populate the data from the database inside of the fields. Let's visit here. So we want to populate these fields with the data that we have, which is basically the same thing that we did for get note by ID, in a sense, where we've populated that particular data and we edit that particular local state, which is a set state, and after hitting on submit, we submit this particular values that we have. So to achieve that one, so for our node edit, I just don't want to write everything out, so I will just bring in what I have written. So this basically uses the obvious thing that we are discussing about is the local state, which is the use state, to update that particular state. For example, we have this set selected nodes. So this basically sets the data that we receive from the API calls to this particular local state, which is selected nodes, and we are making the use of that particular selected node inside here, inside of our input fields. And obviously we need a handle on change method so that it will make the use of user key and user value as a parameter and spreads the old selected nodes and updates it with the user key and the new value. So and obviously in the on submit handler, we are submitting that particular request, and after the put request has been done, we are making the use of this particular thing to set all the states back to an empty string, so that after saving or sending down the request, we are making it blank, the fields blank again. So basically this particular thing is a combination between get notes, which is get notes by ID, which is get detail, and obviously submitting a node with on submit handler, and basically that's what's going on. And obviously these are the Tailwind classes that I've added. And if we hit on save and take a look at the browser here, not this one but this one, okay, looks like everything is working pretty much fine. We have the thing that has been populated for let's go to here, and it's been populated, and let's add revise here. Let's add a note, and add note is not a function. So add note is not a function, so I think we haven't added add note inside of our context right here. So let's go ahead and add add a note case inside of our app reducer first. So inside of our app reducer, we want to make another case for add a note. So it will just take in the notes and spread the old state with state.notes and pass in the action.payload. So this is pretty much it for our app reducer. And inside of our global state, we want to also add another function for add a note, which dispatches the event add notes. So inside here, we want to add another function which is add a note, and ultimately we should pass add a note here as well. So let's hit on save and let's go back to our app right here, and let's hit a refresh. And if we just go to edit, we have the thing that has been populated, but we have the revise here, which seems like it's being stored to the database. And let's add a note there. Let's go back and voila, we have the revised v2 added and edited successfully. So if we go to our notes, if we edit it and if we delete it, everything is working fine. Now the last step would be creating a new note. So to create a new note, we want to obviously add a new case for our app reducer right here. So inside of our app reducer, we want to call this one add a note, because we are editing this particular note and hitting add a note, and also we are hitting in a sense we are making the use of add a note in creating new note as well. So we will go to our main file here, which is global state, and we'll add a new function here, which is, and obviously it's an add note. So I think that's pretty much what we want. So it's basically adding a new note. So we have this pretty much already here, which is pretty much fine. So we are pretty much done with our reducer and global state.js inside of a context. So we will be making the use of note new now. So note new would be somewhat similar than editing note, in a sense where we are making a post request ultimately, but in editing a note we are making the use of put request. And that's a basic difference right there. So inside of our note new, I'll just grab in everything that I have already written and go through the code snippets right here. So definitely, it's imported use history from React Router DOM, which helps us to navigate to our pages programmatically right here. And obviously, we are making the use of add note imported from our global providers right here through app reducers and global state. And definitely we are making the use of local state with title, set title, description, set description, date, and set date. And after everything that has been written in the form fields, we call onSubmit handler, which basically will listen to onChange event, and the value is just the title, description, and the date. And when the onSubmit handler calls, we will make the use of this particular thing that has been stored inside of title, description, and date, which would be updated as we type there, because we are also making the change of making listening to the change for our on change event with set description here. So this would set this particular state, update this particular state, this would update this particular state. And on the on submit, we are just passing the new note with these three values that we have. And obviously we are making a post request, not a put request as we did for edit, but a post request. And this would pretty much work fine. And ultimately we are updating our add notes with the new notes. And lastly, we are pushing our route programmatically. We are pushing our route programmatically to a different route. So let's take a look this in action inside our browser. It looks like we haven't made any buttons for creating a new node, because as you can see here, we have this create a new button if there is no node added, and this particular new add a new node button right here. Let's go ahead and add a fallback. If fallback, in a sense, if there are no nodes, then we will render this, and if there are nodes, then we will render this UI with the add nodes button. I've already added a few conditionals when we don't have any nodes inside of our database, and initially the UI would look something like this. And if we create a node, let's add a random description and title for now. And for the dates, I just want to grab this particular date that has been used before, because I haven't really made the use of any date formatter libraries or so. So I've just added a node, which is this particular node, which seems to be populated. I can just edit it or see a detail and edit it, and let's call it revised and add a note. If we go back, we can see revised here, and we can further on delete this note or add a new note right here. So, and we have the two nodes populated here, and further on we can delete the node and we can see this particular interface. Looks like everything is pretty much working fine as expected. So yeah, so guys, in this video we understood and learned about some of the basic implementation of CRUD with React along with Context API, hooks, and Tailwind JIT. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I assume I have explained my best efforts to make you clear. If you guys want to learn more about development and design, please like, share, and subscribe with a click down below. I'll be trying to make more better videos like this. See you in the next one.